And it looks like Apple is getting, more lawsuits coming their way. And in case you didn't know, apparently, Korean publishers are not happy with Apple. I mean, they're potentially filing a lawsuit against Apple over illegal monopolistic control of app distribution and high payment commissions. Google lawsuit to soon follow. So actually, it's not even just Apple who's going to get it. It's going to be Google as well, maybe, depending on how it goes. And so what I want to point out is Apple is no stranger to getting sued over being a monopoly, because not too long ago, Epic Games has been at war for Apple for about, I believe it was over since 2020, and it just got settled not too long ago. And something interesting is that whenever it comes to mobile apps especially, and mind you, mobile market is absolutely massive. But on this picture right here, you're going to see that, if I want to buy some V-Bucks on the Apple Store, it costs about $10, and I'm assuming it's US. But if you go to the Epic Store, it's, $7.99? So there's a bit of a disconnect here. And it turns out that Apple rakes in quite a bit of a fee. But naturally, even though Fortnite was taken off of the App Store, it's actually been put back up since, this happened. But I want to look into the Korean Publishing Association, because that one is something I did not come across. Now, I'll be honest with you, the only manhwa that I really know of right now that I actually read was Solo Leveling. So I know that's really popular right now, but I'm just telling you, my knowledge on Korean manhwa is not as great. I have been recommended some other ones, but I just haven't read them. So I only read Solo Leveling as far as I know. Just gonna put that out there. So anyways, just going to this article here. It says here, the Korean Publishers Association and the Korea Electronic Publishing Association, both comprising multiple webtoon and web novel companies, as well as an iOS app developer, Dan Scalise, and Korean app developer Pang Sky, filed a class action lawsuit against Big Tech Apple on May 23rd, alleging past and ongoing anti-competitive behavior. It was filed at the U.S. North District Court of California. They seek damages due to the revenue loss from Apple's anti-competitive conduct, which mandated that most digital purchases related to an iOS app must use its app payment system, of which Apple took a 30% cut. App developers weren't allowed to suggest their own payment services within the app, and weren't allowed to link out from the app to external payment options. The 30% fee also applies to purchases on the App Store. App distribution via third-party app stores, which could have provided lower fees, isn't permitted on iOS, except in the EU, because they are very big on consumer rights and not letting companies get away with stuff. Apple also blocked developers from communicating with many users through email, notifications, and other means about alternative payment options, stifling competition. The lawsuit calls for an order to permanently bar Apple from engaging in further illegal monopolistic conduct with regard to iOS app distribution and payment processing services. So, it looks like, from my understanding, Korea's not too happy about this stuff. And it makes sense, really, because actually, I know this is kind of ironic, but this is kind of how a tariff actually works when you think about it. Okay, I know tariffs are a big talk of town right now, but essentially that's what a tariff is. It's like a percentage that the country has to pay for in order for on items. So if steel gets tariffed at 50%, you got to pay the 50% to import to export the tariff into another country. That's basically what it is. So the country gets a cut out of it. Ironic, just ironic to point that out while we're here. But anyways, it's kind of interesting because, Apple just lost the lawsuit against Epic, even after all of that, lawsuit going through stuff, and they were trying to, and by the way, they even lied to the court as well. So what you will see sometimes is that one lawsuit can pave way to many, because, for instance, it's been over the years, people have not been a fan of, monopolies, because whenever you take a look at, even recently, YouTube Premium having ads and stuff, what is the real competition to, YouTube, Apple, and all your big stuff? Not that many. With YouTube, you have maybe Rumble, and how many people do you know are on Rumble right now? Yeah, not that many. Or if you have Apple in terms of phones, you have Android, but it's not like Google is really much better in that aspect either. So that's kind of what it is. And even with streaming services, you have Netflix, Amazon, HBO, Disney Plus. Between all that competition, they're still getting away with some stuff that's a bit subpar. So that's really what we are at now when it comes to it. And so, not that I'm seeing Apple getting sued, it's kind of interesting to note that, it was kind of coming, especially when they lost the lawsuit against Epic. But we'll talk about that lawsuit a bit later. But let's keep going through this article, because there's quite a bit that's being filed. Kim Hwal-chul, CEO of the major Korean web publisher Monpia, is the current chairman of the Korea Electronic Publishing Association, KEPA. KEPA's members include representatives from webtoon and novel publishers are Riddy, Joara, Loan, Delight Books, Mr. Blue, U-Paper, and dozens of others. Also party to the lawsuit is the KPA, the oldest publishing association in the country, comprising hundreds of members, including Monpia, solo leveling publisher DNC Media, and Haksan Publishing, which publishes original IP and imports Japanese titles such as Attack on Titan, Demon Slayer, and Chainsaw Man. Okay, so not only is it affecting like the Korean market, but it could also be potentially affecting like the Japanese manga like market as well. Which, by the way, if I don't tell you, is very massive. So pay attention. Because woo-wee. And so, looking further, a press release from the KPA quoted Kim, who said this lawsuit is all for those who judged to have been harmed by the policies of Apple and Google. In particular, I ask for active participation and support from developers in various fields, including publishing, web novels, webtoons, and distribution apps. We can exert greater power when we collect cases of harm and join voices. The plaintiff in this class action lawsuit are mostly representing large U.S. app developers and all Korean developers, given that Apple settled with smaller U.S. developers, small app developers, in a previous lawsuit. Those who don't opt out of the small app developer settlement are barred from making future legal claims that arise from the same facts argued in this case. In that case, the plaintiffs also represent any app developer globally whose country applies U.S. court judgments. Small app developers are defined below. All former or current U.S. developers of any Apple iOS application or in-app product, including subscriptions sold for a non-zero price via Apple's iOS App Store that's earned through all associated developer accounts, proceeds equal to or less than a million through the App Store U.S. storefront in every calendar year in which the U.S. developer had a developer account between June 4th, 2015 to the date of the small app developer agreement, which is August 24th, 2021. And so even if we keep going here, it says, so still represented in this new lawsuit, U.S.-based app developers who had App Store proceeds of $1,000,001 or more in the calendar year, non-U.S.-based app developers who received any app proceeds, U.S. app-based developers, and non-based app developer sales through non-U.S. app storefronts, and claims based on events that occurred after August 24, 2021. The lawsuit excludes Chinese app developers, with plaintiffs arguing that China's ecosystem prevents Apple's app operation. See page 27 for more details. So I will link that down below if you want to keep reading into this. But you could actually take a look here that separately the plaintiffs have also requested PDF, be on screen for you guys, that this class action lawsuit be formally related to a lawsuit initiated by Epic Games against Apple. More on that below, as it relies on many of the findings already established and they share similar grievances. This will save time. They also request the same judge to preside over both cases. A likely motivation for having the same judge is that in the Epic lawsuit, Apple was already found to have broken California law by not allowing app developers to communicate with many users about other payment options. The judge also commented that Apple's 30% fees may be anti-competitive, but did not rule on this, in part because Epic didn't pursue arguments on the specific fee. So, a lot to take in, but yeah, essentially they're just going after Apple because they are a monopoly, or one of the few monopolies. And when you take into account, especially within Western markets, I'm not sure about the East, so I can't comment on that. But when there's a monopoly, at least over here, most of these come from like very long established companies, and then once they get to a certain point, they're almost untouchable. Like, we can complain about, like, I don't know, Nintendo Switch just came out not too long ago, right? The Switch 2, sorry. And despite the many complaints that we have seen about the Switch 2 and vote with your wallet and all that, I literally saw on Twitter, like, not that long ago, some people bought, like, all the games and stuff for, like, Switch 2 that are out right now. And the people, like, how, like, Mario Kart World, like, guides already out. And people have bought it. And I'm pretty sure it broke records. So, you see what I mean? Despite how much people will complain, especially the vocal minority will complain, yeah, it's just interesting to know. So, it's unrelated tangent aside, but it's just that, yeah, when it comes down to monopolies, people don't really do much until something of action is taken, and if it's successful, then everybody wants to follow suit. That's kind of like how every revolution works when you think about it, but regardless. So, maybe asking, like, why are they suing exactly is really what you want to know. And of course, even though it's kind of answering the first question, I just want to go straight from the article as well to just look at it here. It says here, on May 30th, a week after KPA initiated their lawsuit, the KPA said in its press release that they also plan to file a lawsuit against Google over similar anti-competitive allegations. The KPA estimates that the damage caused by Apple's fees on Korean publishers alone is approximately 60 to 80 billion won, or 43.5 to 58 million USD every year. In 2021, Korea introduced an amendment to its Telecommunications Business Act blocking Apple and Google from mandating in-app payments that are made within the App Store use Google's own payment system. iOS app developers could now link out to external payment processors. The plaintiffs argue that Apple effectively circumvented this amendment in January 2022 by, yes, allowing developers to communicate with users, link out to external services, but charging 26% if the sale began from the app. Apple claims commissions are necessary as app developers are licensing its intellectual property, and Apple develops and provides tools, the iOS SDK, to help developers create iOS apps. The reduction from 30% to 26%, a 4% discount, was estimated to cost most companies more given the cost of operating third-party systems. Effectively, most app developers would struggle to avoid high fees if the purchase were initiated via an iOS app. And so that's where we are now when it comes down to it. So basically we have essentially Apple is charging too much when it comes to app development, at least when it comes down to like making purchases and stuff. And by the way, 30% is a pretty big cut when you really look at it, because like another example we could take a look at is like even like with athletes, or even actually here's some bit more down to earth, I guess, maybe like a streamer. So say a streamer has a manager. Okay, a manager or MCN may take out, oh god, let me think of a number. Like, I'm just going to go with hypothetical, but they may take maybe 10 to 15%. Okay? Even that might be a bit much. But still, they take a decent chunk out of it, and then the streamer gets the rest. However, say you have other staff you have to pay for, you may get, maybe they take out something like that. So when you think about it, like, the more you take out, this, say you make like 10 million and you make about 300,000 off of it, like that's quite a bit of money. 300,000 is nothing. It's nothing like, it's not cheap. So this is something that you can think about when you're taking a look at this kind of stuff. So Apple makes a killing, and its only other big competitor in the mobile market is Google, unless China has something else entirely. I believe China has a different system, so I don't know if you can account it for that as well. But you can see here Korea introduced something like to do anti-competitive laws, but Apple decided to say, oh, let's just lie and circumvent it and go through that instead. And now they're getting sued. But if you actually want to take a reference really, really quickly, if we go quickly through like the Apple Epic lawsuit, actually, which they had lost pretty handedly, by the way, you can actually see here where it goes about fast forward to 2020, and Apple has become what it once railed against, the behemoth seeking to control markets, block competition, stifle innovation. Apple is bigger, more powerful, more entrenched, and more pernicious than monopolists of yesteryear. At a market cap of nearly 2 trillion, Apple's size far exceeds that of any technology monopolist in history. This case considers Apple's use of anti-competitive restraints and monopolistic practices from markets for the distribution of software applications to users of mobile computing devices like smartphones and tablets, and the processing of consumers' payments for digital content used within iOS mobile apps. Apple imposes unreasonable and lawful restraints to completely monopolize both markets and prevent software developers from reaching the over 1 billion of its mobile devices unless they go through a single store controlled by Apple, the App Store, where Apple exacts an oppressive 30% tax on the sale of every app. Apple also required developers who wish to sell digital in-app content to those consumers to use as a single payment processing option offered by Apple and in-app purchase, which likewise carry a 30% tax. So that's from like the lawsuit itself, where we're getting all our references from. And if you really go down even further from this expert that I got from this article as well, it says here that where is it? Sorry. It says here, moreover, because Apple lacks visibility into the transaction, it has created overly simplistic rules to issue refunds, which also increase fraud. For example, apps have suffered from return fraud, where the customer enjoys or resells content and then obtains a refund by providing false information. Prior to 2020, Apple did not provide developers with information that a refund had been issued, and they had no ability to remove the refunded feature to prevent its further use, which is something that I said here. And also, which I skipped it over, but we'll go back really quickly. And says here that first, Apple does a poor job of mediating disputes between the developer and its customer. Consumers do not understand that developers have effectively no control over payment issues or even access to consumer information. Consequently, it can be frustrating for both sides when issues arise relating to the inability to issue and manage the legitimacy of requests for refunds suited to address the issue. Although Apple introduced new tools to address this issue in 2020, it did so only after years of complaints. So here we are. Apple essentially took advantage of developers, and here we are now. And when you really break it down and we really look at this together, you can realize that, Apple, it only was a matter of time before this happened. And the fact that they lost the lawsuit gave other companies all the confidence they need. Because when you take into account, like, dollar conversion and all that, converting, like, won to US, won is significantly lower in terms of value. So they're actually losing out money with all these payouts and these taxes. And the same applies to other countries as well. So what this lawsuit essentially does is that it just makes Apple be like, yeah, you kind of can't overcharge our developers now, can you? And that's where we are at now in terms of this. So the Epic lawsuit really led the way. And especially if the same judge looks at this case, it's going to be like, and they have compelling evidence, Apple's going to have to do another payout or another, settlement. So it's not good for Apple, okay? And so because of that, in the future, I can see someone else deciding to sue Apple again and again and again and again and again. And, that's how you beat big corporations today. You gotta hit them where it hurts. But to be fair, though, Epic Games is also a much larger company, especially with how much money they make off of Fortnite. I don't know how much money they make, but assumingly, probably in the billions at this point, with how many collabs Fortnite gets and all that. So they're big enough to clash with Apple and fight it. With a Korean Publishing Association, I don't know exactly, but if it gets rid of monopolies, what am I to complain? So here we are now. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and follow my social networks below. But that's it for me today. I hate monopolies.